couldn't get past, that's who they are. Everything was about service and logistics, picking up that waste and taking it to a hole and dumping it in the hole. And so they couldn't do any solutioning work. And so we looked at recycling companies, and we finally started working with a company called Sunoco, not the oil company, but the packaging company, because they saw it as a feed for them, so the cardboard and the plastic that they got, they could use back in their operations, and so they had a different approach, and so they created a solutioning arm and did that. So they're one of our major partners, and then we work with a company called Veolia that is a French company that is a waste company, but they're also an energy company, and so they saw that waste management was a better place to be than a hole filling company, and they didn't own real estate. So they were more of a hauler than they were a filler. And so we started working with those companies to do site solution work along with our own folks. And we had a goal of getting to zero waste to landfill and to save some money in the process. And so we started mapping out by sites. We did a lot of analytical work to try and really get good measurements and systems in place. And so part of it is, if you want to do this work, is you got to get good tools, good measurement systems. And so most of our plants didn't really know where they were. And so as we started doing this work, we figured out what are the 3 or 4 biggest plants we have an issue with. So of our 900,000 metric tons, 80,000 metric tons were going out of one location in one of our 150 plants. So more than 10% of our total waste was in one plant. And it was in Apozaco, Mexico, about 3 hours out of Mexico City. And it was a sludge paper making plant. And it put out a lot of sludge, which is just kind of like, think about, if you took a roll of toilet paper, threw it in the bathtub for about an hour or two with wet water in it, and it just becomes this very mealy, fibrous based stuff. And it's not worth anything. And in a normal operation, you'd have fairly long virgin fibers, but this was a recycled paper plant, and so the fibers were very, very short, so there was not really any utility to it. And so we just had it, we went to a landfill. And land is very cheap in Mexico City, and so for $250,000, they were able to dump 80,000 tons into a landfill in Mexico and break even. And so finding a solution that would actually pay out was really, really hard. So we had solutions, well, for $1 million, we have a solution to make them landfill free. It's like, that's not, I'm not going to go to a plant and say you got to lay off 50 people to be able to get zero waste to landfill. You got to make it break even for them financially. And so that was our first big breakthrough, was we found a way to take it and mesh with other materials, and we used it in cement kilns for heat. We learned we could dry our process, we could modify our process to dry out more of the water, to make it a more dry fiber, which became an incineration capable item. And then we also used it to make ceramic tiles, because ceramic needs a filler. And so we were able to sell it to a company to put it in filler and into ceramic tiles. And then we were also able to use it to make roofing tiles by meshing in other paper scrap from other companies with this private company. And then they would take these sheets of paper and lay them out in the Mexican sun and dry them, and then corrugate them and paint them with tar. And then they would use them as corrugated roofing tiles on small, cheap adobe pipettes. And we were able to get rid of all the landfill and take it zero waste to landfill. And then the other one that was interesting was Vallejo. Vallejo is a soap plant. And so, from a standpoint of what you learn, is in the design of our plants back in the day, Vallejo was a wastewater plant, was wastewater issue. And so every pipe came together into a big pipe and then out into the wastewater system. And so that was to be able to consolidate and make it simple from a flow standpoint, so they could handle all the fluids in the plant that way. The problem was, this was basically clean water. This was soapy water, and this was nasty. So this was nasty. And yet this was only 5%. 95% was good soapy water. And so what we did is we just went in there and repiped, sold that, and then we took this into a treatment system and solved that by burning it off.
Who did you sell? I think soapy water would have value. Who did you sell it to?
Car wash companies are a great source. We sell soap and shampoos and the like, waste shampoos to them all the time.
Okay.
We use it for cleaning trucks, etc. So,
that's cool.
So once we just figured out what the issue was, and we had many plants that were all designed the same way. And so that was a way to just take our liquid base and change it completely how we did that. So that's kind of what we did. And we saved about $200 million by doing that work, and we reduced our waste eventually by about 85 or 90%, just by looking at what our waste was, putting measurement systems in place, and then solutioning every one of those individual wastes. And then we tracked them and communicated and marketed as well, because what we found is that people do better when they actually know where they stand. And so, if you go to most manufacturing plants, in our system at least, they would have flags, safety flag. There's been no safety incidents in this plant in the last 25 years. There's been, we have hygiene awards, this and that. So we created an award for zero waste to landfill, and we started awarding plants and publicizing it and all that, and all of a sudden plants were like, hey, I want one of those. And we started getting them to compete with each other and building a matrix of that. And so there are about 85 or 90 plants now that are zero waste to landfill. Wastewater strategies are tied into zero manufacturing, reduced material usage per product, circular economy, increased recycling, water conservation, and eliminating site water and food waste are some of the things. I put in here if you're doing a zero waste consultancy. The big thing here is walk around first. The other thing I realized is, as I started to do this work, was if I'm there, somebody's failed. They didn't bring me in because it was working really well. Same thing if like AK Steel is, if you're talking about sustainability, because they don't have a solid program, that's why you're there. And so it's really good to kind of get a manage the egos and all that, but that's kind of that. So landfill we talked through. Rumpke has been around since 1932. Was originally a coal business. Realized that coal was not a place. They were smart. They got out of coal much earlier than the average bear, which was good on them. Later became a hog farm. Moved to Coleraine in 45, and got out of farming and then full-time waste hauling in the 1950s. And they've been a family operation since. 11 landfills, 10 recycling centers, mostly all organized. I've got a map. Key thing you want to measure here is 50 to 60 miles. If you're hauling trash or hauling most anything more than 50 to 60 miles, logistically, you're losing money. That means they can probably get to about Dayton, and that can make sense for them if they go any further than that. And so they've got a map here I'll show you. And their current landfill's got about 15 years of capacity available to them, which is why they have a MRF to try and stretch that out as long as they possibly can. But 50 to 60, I usually think of 50, but 50, 60 miles, after that it doesn't make any sense. Highly engineered, and they've got some methane pulls as well that they can do on site and flare up. What do we throw away? This is what they throw away. 57% of what they get in that landfill is paper or plastic that could be recycled.
Interesting.
And that's one of the things why the MRF, that they want to educate, is like, because that obviously if they can cut those two out, that landfill lasts, 2 or 3 times as long.
So I was just at the recycling in Anderson Township. We have like a recycling center where you can go and drop like bigger items off. And like the normal recycling, and same for like my area, is it's kind of restricted though on like the paper and plastic you can recycle. Like I know, like it was like, oh, it can't be like some type like paper, like if it's a pizza box and it's got oil in it, well then you can't recycle it.
Yeah.
Or if it is like paper towels, I don't know, so I look at that and I'm like, well, is a lot of that maybe being measured by, yeah, sure, it's still paper, but you couldn't recycle it anyways.
I'm sure probably in there is some that, should still go to landfill. Most pizza companies now put a sheet in there. So at least the last 4 or 5 pizzas that I can recall all had a sheet in there. So when I pulled that sheet out of there, the box was perfectly fine and able to be recycled.
That's interesting.
Just because one of those small sheet of like waxy paper is so much easier to throw that small piece in versus a huge honking box of cardboard that can be recycled.
And I don't want to get us far off topic, but what happens to the landfill once it's filled? So you've got this real estate, you're making money off of it by filling it. Once it's theoretically done, you can't make money off of it unless I assume you sell it. So what happens to a landfill after the fill is filled?
You cover it through a set amount of course. So I lived near a place in Virginia Beach called Mount Trashborn.
Okay.
And so it became a park.
Okay.
And so they literally they covered it up with dirt and treatments and all that type of stuff. They still vented some methane out of it. And there was it became a skiing and sliding hill for kids.
Yeah, why is it perfect north of landfill?
I don't know.
I think it is. I think I remember hearing, Google will tell me the
Okay.
answer, but.
So you'll
I'm
sell it
pretty sure
either
it
to a
is.
private business that's gonna do something with it, or you sell it to some sort of municipality or government entity.
That's crazy.
I think there's a number of landfills that have like, throughout the Midwest that have turned into schemes,
Yeah.
and it's like it's a big deal.
Yeah, we did tubing off of the one in Virginia when we
Okay.
had snow.
Okay.
I know that ski perfect north, it's a nice little train.
So, yeah, typically put to use as a park or something.
Interesting.
Because you're not gonna wanna build a condo on it necessarily. so.
No, big basement.
But I'll slide on the ground and roll around on it.
So recycling, Rumpke recycled 900,000 pounds in 2014, 900 million pounds. This is what their MRF operation looks like. There's videos online you can take a look at. There are people here to kind of make sure that there's, if somebody does throw a coat hanger or something like that there, so they have physical sorters that pull. Otherwise it sifts down, and so the paper goes on top and the bottles and heavy stuff will go down below, and then they're able to recycle a bunch. Glass, again, chews up those machines pretty heavily. So they try to take most of the glass to Dayton where they have a glass recycling facility. And Dayton, again, is on the edge of that 50 to 60 miles that they can manage. This MRF, about 4 years ago, burned down, and they had to rebuild it. And during that point in time, they shipped stuff up to Dayton, and they were running Dayton on 2 or 3 shifts of operations. Woman I worked with, her husband runs one of the shifts of this operation. He was working night shifts up in Dayton for a year and a half while this got rebuilt. There's the different locations. So there's small operation in Dayton. Biggest hubs are Cincinnati and Columbus, and that's kind of their area where they deal with things. These slides are just for your use. I'm not going to go through them in detail to show you that they're here. It takes 1 plastic bottle to 1,000 years to degrade the landfill.
Another quick question is, why don't we have any more competition with recycling companies?
Infrastructure is pretty expensive, so that real estate and filling it and logistics of all the trucks and all that. So you have, Republic's got a small operation in town here, because I know some of my neighbors, like 2 or 3 of my neighbors get picked up on Tuesdays, and Republic does that. So there is some, but Rumpke really, from a cost standpoint, they're highly competitive, and typically you won't see folks. So typically there's one company that will own a region or an area.
Yeah.
And the 2 big ones are Waste Management and Republic. Republic bought Allied, which was number 3. So now they bought 2 and 3. So I think they're still smaller than Waste Management, but they tend to own those areas. 5 plastic bottles make a shirt. 5 can also be fiberfill for a jacket. So if they're recycled, great thing, but 1,000 years. 100,000 marine animals are killed each year as a result of plastic bag pollution. Aluminum cans. 1 new can, it's the same amount of energy to make 1 new can as it does to make 20 recycled cans. So again, recycling aluminum is a really, really good thing to be doing, and it works really, really well. So there's that slide you saw before, some tips and some tricks. Here's the list of the various codes and what they are. So for your personal home use, you can take that home and educate your significant other or not. Recycle or reuse. So 1s, 2s, and then in this case, you've got some sums. So limited sum, which means you need to check with your local recycler. And each recycler will have some ability to take, like a 5 is in some cases yes, some cases no. And you can go and Rumpke, and I have not figured out yet, I've not gone on to check this piece of it, but that's kind of how it plays out. 7 is a not happening thing. But 1s and 2s, absolutely. And then here's a little bit more description on each of them for you. You can look at your leisure. Countries winning the recycling race. Germany, South Korea, 65% in Germany. Very serious about recycling. Recycling located all over the place, and you're expected to take it, go down to the local, there'd be a hub, in every community would have a hub. And you would go there, drop your stuff off, and colored glass and everything all broken down. They do a very good job. Here we are about 35%. So we are just below about the halfway point. Typically populated by mostly European countries up at the top. They do a better job. Developing markets will be down the low end. Recycled materials losing value. Average ton of recycled material in the North Carolina sorting facility has dropped in value overall. The biggest thing to talk about is China National Sword Program. National Sword is where China said, enough of sending me your crap. We were sending them highly contaminated loads of recycling, and they said enough is enough. And so they said, hey, we're not going to accept certain types of solid waste. And so what's happened is smaller operations in particular now are either stuck sending them to landfill or trying to find local customers to take it inside the United States. And so the big players and big partners are still able to handle it fairly well. But China has really kind of made it much more difficult. And so pricing has shifted, and you've got folks like these folks here that are just piling up inventory right now. So it's really changed the dynamic of things pretty heavily in the world trade market for recycling. And China consumes about 55% of the world's scrap paper. Most of the corrugate, 95% of all corrugate went to China, because they would make it into, and Nine Dragons would make it into cardboard, and then all the products that came back to the US and consumable products would come back in those boxes that were made over in China. So that's I'm going to skip that and get into Pacific Garbage Patch. This is the Pacific Garbage Patch. It's about the size, as you can see, of Spain, France, or Germany. And it sits between Hawaii and the coast of the United States. And that's kind of what it looks like on the surface. A lot of information. We'll go through a little bit more detail. Charles Moore, Captain Charles Moore, found it. He's a Coast Guard captain. He was trooping through the Pacific, and he came across this, and he started taking a look, and it was just a massive space of plastic waste. I had a chance to meet him about 4 years ago down in Atlanta for a plastic pollution event. Really cool guy. He couldn't wait to get back out to sea, as a typical sea captain would. And it's part of the gyre, it's part of the North Pacific gyre, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Plastic waste is produced and mismanaged. Plastic tons. So the red here is the portion of plastic from each country that's mismanaged. So you see here, very little plastic in the US is mismanaged. Overall, in the Americas, it's pretty good overall. Most of it's managed correctly. But look over here in Southeast Asia. Very poorly managed. Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, China. Really badly managed. And so what's happening is this is the source of most of that ocean Pacific plastic waste we're seeing. Very quickly, what floats and what sinks. And so you've got to look at the density of the various products. This is your density measure over here. So plastic bags sit pretty much on the surface. Polystyrene containers will sink a little bit. Soft drink bottles will sink a little bit more. And so you see the cigarette filters, textiles, kind of floats through the mix of it. Bottle caps float the highest. And so it becomes what looks like food for animals, and particularly birds, which we'll see more about. So there's the big heat source of plastic being put into the oceans. And then here are the gyres. So you have an Indian Ocean gyre, South Pacific, South Atlantic, North and North. This one here, all of this goes sucking right into the North Pacific. And that's why we have the big, huge gyre. So you probably see some waste in these other ones, but the majority of it has been in this one here. And so we won't have time to watch this video, but I talk about Chris Jordan's a photographer. He does a lot of photography, big wall-type murals, and he uses plastic waste as his model. And so he will take scrap, you can see up here very slightly, that's a photograph he took, and it's about the size of this wall, and it's like a wave of the mountain and all that. It's all made out of small, microscopic pieces of plastic. And so he got 60,000 pieces of plastic from Charles Moore from the Pacific Garbage Patch, and he arranged all of them to look like that from a ladder, and then he took a photo of it from up on top. And so that's what he does. And so he found out about Midway Island, and on Midway Island, there was a dynamic going where albatrosses, which is what you see here, were dying. And they were dying with plastic in their stomachs, so they were starving and dying from the plastic contents. And so he went out there and took a lot of these pictures. These are all unmodified, not modified by him. They slowly decayed and the plastic remained in the stomachs of these birds. So these are albatrosses. Albatrosses, Midway Island is probably the heartbeat of breeding grounds and nesting grounds for albatrosses in the Pacific. And they're dying in large numbers because of plastic pollution from the Pacific Garbage Patch. And so he went there and he filmed, he did a TED Talk, which is what this is here, and then he did a small video as well of his photographs showing him on the island and showing the dead birds. And he did one video that I don't show anymore, which is a video of a baby albatross dying in about a 2-minute, and it just shows the baby slowly dying from plastic poisoning. It showed the mom feeding the plastic to the baby because they skim the water and they think it's fish that they're getting because they don't know what else it might be, because they don't assume there'd be plastic out in the middle of the ocean. And so they're killing all of these birds. And so that's Chris Jordan from Midway and albatrosses. Electronic waste, a lot of opportunities there. Again, we talked, yes ma'am.
I'm Terry from Jersey Mike's. Got a delivery out here and I've got it out on the table sitting out for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
Come on in.
Yeah, I'm gonna come sit down.
Have a
and-
seat.
Thank you.
Take my exam for me next week.
Electronic waste, most all of this is recycled, so Cohen locally is the place to go. I will share one story about electronic recycling is when I was buying IT for our company, our CEO at the time was a guy named Ed Arzt, and we got a phone call from a dentist in Idaho. And he said, hey, I'm a dentist in Idaho, and I just got a refurbished iPhone. And there's this guy named Ed Arzt. You guys know, I searched him and it looks like he's in your company, so the person who answered our person answered said, yes. It's got all of his information on it. He had turned in his phone, and for some reason the company was supposed to scrub it or whatever and then sell it out, didn't scrub it or something like that, and so his phone literally went to this dentist, and fortunately the guy was a decent guy, and he said, hey, and so we sent somebody out there to recover it and all that, but you want to make sure that when you turn anything into Cohen or anybody else, that you make sure you scrub that sucker but good, because you don't want to have your stuff out there, company-wise or personal-wise. But Cohen's a great place to go. Food waste, we talked about 40% of food is wasted each year. EPA's got a food recovery approach, so one is source reduction, which is don't make it in the first place, so portion control. There's a really good commercial about the strawberries in the refrigerator where mom went out and bought a bunch of strawberries, stuck in the back of the refrigerator, and then 2 weeks later it had come to life with green and mold and all kinds of stuff. And so just watching how much stuff you actually put in your refrigerator, how much stuff you buy, to make sure you're not buying stuff that just is not going to go be used. Then feed hungry people is obviously the next thing, so get the food banks. Then feed animals, industrial uses for it, and then composting. And then as a last resource would be have it actually go to a landfill. And that's the EPA food recovery. We created a food action plan for the area of Cincinnati. It's been struggling to get resourcing work, and we're trying to figure out how we can work with Kroger now. And education. Here's Bill Emerson, the Good Samaritan Act. So he protects you if you donate stuff, as long as you handle it responsibly, things like refrigeration and the like, so you don't have it like sitting out. You know, egg salad stuff that's been sitting out for 3 days. Just that sends it in the trash. But that's Bill Emerson. He died right before this act was passed. 1976. Let's take a 5-minute break, quick stretch, and then we're going to get into water. And we're going to take a look at back there. There are articles. Team 1 will be the government. There's an article here for everybody. That's the one that says 10, which is about Nestle. So that's 10. So that's one for everybody. And then Nestle will be Team 1. So Team 1 is Nestle. Team 2 is the activists. And Team 3 is the state of Michigan, okay? So if you're 1, you're Nestle. If you're 2, you're the activist. And if you're 3, you're the state of Michigan. So 1, 2, 3. And then everybody grab a Bloomberg article. Or team leaders take it and pass it out to your teams. That would also be a great way to do it.
I have
And then be back in 5 minutes. So
1,
take
2,
a
3. I
break.
need one more, Hope. Do you have another one? Thank you. Okay, you're here. Yeah, you're with, yep.
Rick.
And then where's Sean? Did he get one? I don't know yet. I guess we'll just talk and move together
And Jordan.
and we can gather back here.
Oh,
Yeah, sure.